Hi, I'm Jose Armenta, and this is your Federal Employee Benefits, where we cover topics aimed at helping FERS federal employees like you make smart financial decisions. Today, we're going to cover one of the most important, if not the most important, decision you'll make as you prepare to retire. And that's what withdrawal strategy will you use? Okay, how are you going to decide how much money you can withdraw from your TSP sustainably throughout retirement? And so there's a lot of different articles out there. There's a lot of different options on how you can withdraw from your TSP. But today, we're going to cover the most prominent, okay, the four most prominent withdrawal strategies. Now, we're not going to get into the weeds of every strategy because that would be an hour-long video. This is more an introduction to the four most prominent strategies so you have an idea of what your options are. And then based off of your situation, you can decide which one you want to do a deeper dive on. Now, if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. And let's get started. Okay, so first up, probably the most popular withdrawal strategy out there, and most of you have probably heard of it. I've done a video on it, I have an article on it, and I'll put a link to those down below. But the first one up is the 4% rule, okay? Now, the 4% rule is a type of systematic withdrawal strategy. Now, with this strategy, you withdraw 4% of your TSP, okay, or 4% of your investable assets for retirement in the first year. And that's the only year that you're actually withdrawing 4%. And every subsequent year, you're going to increase your withdrawal by the inflation rate of the prior year, okay? So let's say the first year you withdraw 4%, and then the following year there's a 5%, or during that first year there was 5% inflation. For that next year, you're going to increase your withdrawal, your first year withdrawal, by 5%, okay? And you'll continue to do that throughout retirement, okay? Continually increasing your withdrawal for the inflation of the prior year, okay? Now, the benefits to this strategy, okay, is its simplicity. It's very simple, easy to implement, especially if you plan on doing this on your own. Okay, there's not a lot of moving parts. You don't have to move money around. So it's very simple. Okay, that's the main benefit to this strategy. Another benefit to this strategy is that your retirement income is fixed or increases with inflation. And as you'll see, as we cover some of these other strategies, that's not always the case. In some strategies, you may need to take a pay cut if the market is down or if you don't hit your growth targets. Okay, with this strategy, your income is fixed or it's increasing with inflation. Okay, which makes planning in retirement a lot easier. Okay, so those are the main benefits to this strategy. Now, some of the negatives, okay, and every strategy is going to have some pros and some cons, and that's no different with this strategy. Some of the negatives is that with this type of strategy, okay, this is a static withdrawal strategy, meaning it's not dynamic, it's not changing depending on your situation, is it's not flexible, okay? If you need to make a larger withdrawal for whether that's healthcare or a large purchase, maybe you need to repair your roof, right? Whatever the reason, if you need to make a larger withdrawal, this strategy does not accommodate that. Now, another negative for this account or for this strategy is that it's based off very specific parameters. Okay, the 4% rule is based off of research by Bill Bengen. Okay, and the research that showed you could withdraw 4% increased by inflation in subsequent years and do so sustainably without running out of money was done with a very specific portfolio and with a certain time horizon in retirement, okay? And so if you're going to use this strategy, make sure you're familiar with those rules. Again, I have an article and a video detailing the parameters that you'll have to follow, but just be aware of that, okay? This is based off of research with some specific parameters, and so if you're going to use it, make sure you're aware of what those are. Okay, now the second strategy is called income flooring, also known as essential versus discretionary income strategy. Now with this strategy, The goal is to have a guaranteed stream of income to cover your essential living expenses. Okay, so that's going to be your housing, your food, your healthcare, and taxes. Okay, now the way this is usually implemented is someone will take their investable assets, right, their retirement funds, purchase a fixed annuity and enough of a fixed annuity to provide payments that cover their essential living expenses, right? So that's providing that floor of income. And then all expenses that are above that, that are non-essential, that are discretionary, are going to be covered from the remaining investable assets. Okay, so they'll be covering those through withdrawals, some type of withdrawal strategy. So the benefits to this, okay, is that you have guaranteed income. Okay, you have more guaranteed income, which is not the case with the 4% rule, right? With the 4% rule, you're relying on investments, and there is no guarantee when you rely on investments. Okay, so with this strategy, you have a more guaranteed income. So that's one of the pros. Another benefit to this strategy is that usually the way it's implemented is your income will be fixed. Okay, it won't decrease whenever there's a drop in the stock market. Your income will be fixed during retirement and will likely increase with inflation, especially if your fixed annuity has an inflation adjustment on it. Now, some of the negatives to this strategy is that as a federal employee, you already have two streams of fixed guaranteed income, right? Social Security and your FERS pension. And so usually you have the capacity to take more risk, continue to invest in the stock market, and have the potential for more growth and larger income payments during retirement. Because one thing to keep in mind is that anytime you're investing, there's a trade-off between risk and return. And so although having an annuity and guaranteed income is great, okay, there's a lot less risk with those type of products. There's a lot less reward, okay? The payout ratio, which is the ratio between the amount you give the insurance company and the amount they pay you, is typically a lot less than what you can get through your rate of return in the stock market, the average rate of return in the stock market. Okay, typically there's a lot less, and the reason for that is because, again, there is very little risk with these insurance products, and there's a lot more risk when you're investing in the stock market. But for most federal employees, you have the capacity to take that risk because you already have two guaranteed streams of income that will usually cover your essential living expenses, and so you can try to achieve better growth and larger payments during retirement through continuing to invest throughout retirement. Okay, so that's one of the potential negatives of this strategy, is you're giving up that growth potential, or usually a significant part of that growth potential, by taking money out of your investable assets and purchasing an annuity. Another negative to this benefit is that anytime you're purchasing an annuity, you're giving up liquidity, right? You're giving up access to your money. The insurance company is going to hold that money, and a lot of times you're not going to have access to that money. Okay, most of the time you won't. And so if you need to make a large purchase, whether that's for healthcare or, again, the example from the last strategy, repair your roof. Okay, you're not going to have access to that money that you hand over to the insurer. Okay, also, that money won't be available when you pass. Okay, whether you live for 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, or 1 year, when you give that money to the insurance company to purchase that fixed annuity, once you pass, that money is theirs. The payments typically stop. Now, you could buy certain contracts that might continue the payments for a certain period, but usually that's going to cost more money. Okay, so typically the payments will stop after your death or after you and your spouse pass. Okay, and that means that money you gave to the insurer is not going to be available for your heirs. Okay, so you're not going to be able to pass that on to your heirs as a bequest, whereas money that you keep invested, okay, in your TSP, in an IRA, and you have a strategy, let's say the 4% rule, any money that you don't use during retirement is going to be passed on to your heirs. Okay, so that's a potential negative, something to keep in mind when considering this strategy. Okay, now the third strategy is called guardrails or dynamic distribution rates, okay, which is the academic name for it. And what this strategy aims to do is to set an initial withdrawal rate. So similar to the 4% rule, you're going to have a withdrawal rate that is sustainable. But unlike the 4% rule, this strategy is dynamic, meaning that that withdrawal rate will change up or down. Okay. Now, this strategy is based off of research by Guyton and Klinger. And what they found in their research is that you could withdraw more than the 4% that is used in the 4% rule strategy and have it be sustainable. So you can have a sustainable rate of between 5.2 to 5.6% if certain rules were followed. Okay. Now, some of those rules, if you're going to implement this strategy, is that you have to be willing to take pay cuts. Okay. So with this strategy, they have an upward limit of 20%, meaning if your portfolio balance increases more than 20%, you can increase your withdrawal rate. And if your portfolio drops more than 20%, then you have to be willing to cut your withdrawal rate. Okay. And so that's what makes this strategy dynamic. Okay. Is that it's changing depending on market performance, depending on your portfolio balance. Okay? So that's how this strategy works. Okay. Now the pro, okay, one of the benefits to this strategy is that it's dynamic. So it can accommodate larger withdrawals during retirement. So let's say you need to make a larger withdrawal for healthcare or to make a repair on your home. You can do that with this strategy, keeping in mind that if you withdraw enough and you fall below that 20% limit for your balance, then you're going to have to cut back on your distributions, but it can accommodate some larger withdrawals if needed. Now, that is a good segue into the negatives. One of the negatives is that you might have to take a pay cut. Okay, it's dynamic and your income can fluctuate. Okay, whereas with the 4% rule and income flooring, your income was fixed or increased with inflation. With this strategy, your income can decrease, right? And it depends on the market. So every time the market drops below or drops more than 20%, you may have to take a pay cut. And I know a lot of folks don't want that kind of instability in their income in retirement. So keep that in mind when considering this strategy. Okay, now the fourth and final strategy is called the bucket strategy or the time segmentation strategy. Now, this is the strategy that I use when I work with clients and help them retire. And now what this strategy does is it divides your TSP, your investments, into three buckets. You have a short-term bucket, a mid-term bucket, and a long-term bucket. Now, usually you're going to divide these buckets based off of time horizon and risk. Okay, so for example, when I'm implementing this strategy, I'll have 3 years worth of retirement withdrawals in the short-term bucket in cash, so the G fund. Then we'll have 4 years worth of withdrawals in the midterm bucket invested in bonds. Okay, so that gives us 7 years worth of withdrawals outside of the stock market. Okay, with the remaining assets, which is usually the largest portion of the assets, in the long-term bucket. Okay, invested with a growth orientation in stock funds. Okay, and so what that does, having 7 years worth of retirement withdrawals outside the stock market, what that does is it gives us time to allow the long-term bucket to recover when the next recession happens. Not if, but when. And the reason why that 7 years is important is because the average recession is recovered within 7 years. Okay, and so when the next recession happens and you're utilizing this bucket strategy, you can rely on your short and midterm bucket during the recession when the market is down and allow that long-term bucket, which is going to again hold the majority of your assets, to recover and not have to sell any of the stocks at a loss. Now, the way that this works in practice is when the stock market or when the economy is doing well, you're going to trim that long-term bucket. Okay, you're going to sell some of the stocks to replenish your short-term bucket. And then when the market is down and you don't want to sell the funds in your long-term bucket, you'll trim your midterm bucket and to replenish the short-term bucket. Okay, again, because you're going to have 7 years total, and that's going to give you time to allow that long-term bucket to recover and allow the recession to recover. Now, one of the negatives to this benefit is that it's dynamic. similar to the guardrail strategy. There are a lot of moving parts. And so if you plan on doing this on your own, it might not be the strategy for you. It might be easier for you to implement a static strategy, such as the 4% rule or the income flooring strategy. Okay. Now, one of the benefits to this strategy is that, again, it mitigates stock market risk because you have 7 years worth of withdrawals needed in retirement outside the stock market. That gives you plenty of time to allow your stocks to recover before having to sell them. Okay, so it mitigates stock market risk, it mitigates sequence of return risk. Another benefit to this strategy is that because you're still invested in the stock market, because you have that safety of the 7 years, you can invest with growth orientation, okay, without taking on too much risk because you have, again, that 7 years outside. You can have a growth orientation with the majority of your assets, which allows your nest egg, your investment assets, to grow during retirement and help you mitigate longevity, right? Mitigate the risk of having a long retirement and running out of assets. So that's where that long-term bucket comes in. It's really the growth engine of this strategy. So those are some of the benefits of this strategy. But again, keeping in mind that there are a lot of moving parts. So if you're going to do this on your own, it might not be the strategy for you. And those are the 4 most prominent TSP withdrawal strategies. Now, again, every strategy is going to have its advantages and disadvantages. And the right strategy will depend on your specific situation. Now, with those static strategies, those might be most appropriate for individuals who are going to go it alone and might want a simple strategy to implement. Whereas the dynamic strategies offer more flexibility but have more moving parts. So keep that in mind when deciding which strategy is best for you. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, hit that like and subscribe button. That's the best way to support this channel. And until next time, I'm Jose Armenta. Take care. Now, if you're interested in learning more about how my financial planning firm helps FERS federal employees with their financial planning and retirement needs, visit www.createyourpathfp.com. I look forward to seeing you there.